Stanley, lizards in Panama. Do we have any nearby?
Oh, there are very many species of lizards. My house is full of lizards. When you come to Panama, you'll see lizards everywhere. In the daytime, at nighttime, in the daytime you will see the iguanas. At this time of day, because of it's very warm, lizards are very smart. You're not going to find them out in the sun. They're hiding under the bushes and under the they're out in the streams. They're playing it cool. But there are definitely a lot of them.
Oh, how come we don't see the wild animals in the rainforest? At least not all the time.
Birds, for example, tend to be out very early, 5:30 in the morning. If you go out in the forest here at Barro Colorado, you will see hundreds of species of birds. If you go to Galeta Point Marine Lab, which is on the Caribbean side, surrounded by mangroves, you will see about 300 species of birds early in the morning. But at noontime, again, they're hiding, they're just keeping away from a very hot tropical sun.
Actually, you get to see quite a few wild animals if you're just very quiet. You know, sometimes I sit in my room on the porch. My friend Ann and I were just sitting on the porch watching the other day, and white-faced monkeys came right by our room. Not walking by in the path, but swinging through the trees, and they kind of looked at us curiously, and we kind of watched back. There's a lot of wonderful wildlife here.
Well, I think in this part of the world, Panama, for example, it's outside the hurricane belt. The Hurricane Alley is about 100 miles to the north of Panama. So we don't get hit by hurricanes like New Orleans or most of the islands of the Caribbean. We do have once in a while some earthquakes, mostly towards the border with Colombia and in the border with Costa Rica. Hurricanes for Panama mean a lot of rainfall because the hurricanes tend to absorb the humidity from the Pacific, and then we get lots of rain, and if it comes with very high tides, the rivers tend to flood. But hurricanes usually give you a lot of warning. Earthquakes will definitely never give you warning, and they're the scariest. Something interesting that has happened in our grandparents' time, boys and girls used to get married at 17, 18. Nowadays, girls want to go to college, they want to get their master's degree, so they're getting married at 26, at 27. Boys don't want to get married until they're 30, 31. They want to finish their college, they want to go to graduate school. So in Panama, there's been an enormous change, and all through Latin America as well, with people marrying later, going to school, starting families later, and also having smaller families. In our grandpapa's generation, it was common for families to have 8. My grandpapas had, for example, 11 children. Nowadays, nobody wants to have 11 children. Can you imagine buying 11 pairs of shoes, sneakers? Thank you. That's a very good question. I'm glad you mentioned the Kuna people. They're one of the 7 indigenous groups of Panama. 25%, a quarter of the territory of Panama, belong to the Indian communities. And the Kunas tend to concentrate in an archipelago in the Caribbean called Cunayala. And they're also on the Pacific side, on 2 very large rivers of the Pacific, the Bayano and the Chucunaque. Now, in the Indian villages in Panama, usually most of those villages will not have electricity. So they will not have, for example, computers. What it's been tried to do now, it's to have solar power panels installed in the villages. So kids like you in schools like yours can access the internet and chat or watch programs, but it's a challenge. Most of the Indian communities in Panama do not have electricity, and most of the schools in the Indian areas of Panama do not have electricity. So that's unlike your school that has a nice library, it has electricity 24 hours a day. That doesn't happen in the Indian communities. That's where we have the most of the people who cannot read and write in Spanish are located in the Indian territories. So for Panama, a big challenge is in the future to teach most kids your age Spanish so they can be literate, and then they can go on later to college. Okay, what happens is that we only have 2 seasons. You fellas out there have 4 seasons. We only have 2. A rainy season, the last 9 months, that's when kids go to school. And the dry season, which is 3 months, and that's when we're off school. So at this moment, exactly, in the middle of the dry season, kids are out there going to the river, swimming, going to the beach, and they're not in school. But soon, at the end of March, everybody will be trooping back to school. And that's the reason, and the reason really why we have that kind of calendar, it's because when I was small, for example, we had to help in the farm. We had to help with the planting of the rice, with the corn, and the beans. And the dry season is the time when the forest is cut down, it's burned, and you plant. And then you weed your crops, then you harvest them, and then you store them. And that's called slash and burn agriculture. So 100 years ago or 200 years ago, well, all the children had to help with the farm chores, which depended on the weather. And in the rainy season, we did the harvest. We harvested corn, the rice, and we stored it for the rest of the year.
Stanley, are you selling any of these crops to other countries?
Now, because Panama has such poor soils, we don't have the what's called agro-export crops like Guatemala or Salvador that have a lot of volcanic good soils. Because of the reddish soils of Panama, they're very poor in nutrients. The only main agricultural crop we have is bananas and a little bit of sugar cane. But the main resource of Panama really is water, rainfall. And it is this water in astronomical quantities that falls during the 9 months of the rainy season that makes possible the Panama Canal. For the Panama Canal depends on huge quantities of fresh water from one Caribbean river called the Chagres River. And every time a ship goes through the canal, it uses 52 million gallons of fresh water from the Chagres River to move from the Caribbean to the Pacific and vice versa.
52 million gallons.